Embiid got a piece of it. Running the floor. Embiid stuffs it.
Harden for three. James Harden with his second triple.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Pick Swap Podcast. We are just on the brink of the NBA Finals. Game 7 last night between the Celtics and the Heat came down to the wire. It was an exciting one. Neither team feels good to see, move on into the next round. Not fun for Sixers fans here, but it's me and Sean Bernard. Sean, how you doing, brother?
Yeah, not too bad. Nice Memorial Day weekend coming off, but some good basketball. Sad the season's winding down. Sixers offseason in full swing, but it's still cool to watch kind of this high level of basketball being played. Cool to watch the Miami Heat scrap back into that game. I do think I've undervalued how great the Miami Heat team was, and purely Jimmy Butler. What a great performance all series. So great basketball game last night, and it sucks just sitting at home watching these, but it is what it is.
Yeah, it does. I feel vindicated by that, though. I felt vindicated by the Heat losing last night. I don't know. All series, it's a weird feeling to even feel like you're rooting for either one of those teams. Like, just watching you as a fan, you just kind of feel yourself starting to lean one way or the other. And as much as I tried not to, it felt like I was rooting for the Celtics, for a portion of that series. I hated the way the Heat series ended. I hated the way that everyone's gawking over Jimmy Butler. I get it. I understand. But I was just so done with hearing about it. So I'm happy they're out, and and it's Warriors basketball, the Bay Area. I'm rooting for you.
I felt the opposite on it. I was kind of surprised as well because I left that series with a sour taste in my mouth about the Miami Heat. But just watching Jimmy Butler just will that team to victory. A team that I still stand by is I can name 6 to 8 teams just purely more talented than that Miami Heat squad. When we talk about obviously the Warriors, the Celtics, the Bucks, the Grizzlies, the Suns, you can go down and there's quite a few teams that are more well built, but just the scrappiness, the connectivity between everybody, and Jimmy Butler just willing their team to victory. Give him massive credit. I'm all the way back in on Jimmy Butler, as much as I hate to say it, and I do want to say he has every right to shoot that last 3-point shot. I think it's crazy the amount of scrutiny that he's taken from that, because that Miami Heat team is not remotely in that series if it isn't for him. And if that shot goes in, he's absolutely the baddest man on the planet right now. So it was a good look, a pull-up three. You go for the dagger. And also from a basketball sense, you would rather take the lead there than try and tie it up and allow the Celtics that last shot, because that's how things would have played out. So I have zero issue with Jimmy taking it. I wish it would have fallen. It would have been awesome, but that's how the ball rolls sometimes.
I was happy to see him miss. I don't care. I don't care anymore, man. I was done with them. I'm done hearing about them. It's not none of these things happen. He had a shit game. What was it? Game 3? It was 8 points, something ridiculous. And again, I understand he was incredible in that series. He was the man for them the entire way through. But if Embiid scored 8 points in a game, the world would have burned down. And you know what I'm saying though? It's this type of shit. Kyle Lowry, 7.8 points per game in a 7-game series, looked like a shell of himself. No one's talking about that. He's getting paid $30+ million a year. Where are we talking about Kyle Lowry being overpaid? Even if this was Tobias Harris, who's hardly even in the conversation of ever the all-star conversation, that the cornerstone type player conversation that Kyle Lowry is in. If he was averaging less than 8 points per game in a series, I just don't understand the inconsistency in the scrutiny between these teams. And the Heat are one of those teams that they had 22 free throws at halftime. Jimmy Butler had more free throws at halftime than the entire Celtics team did, and they were still down by 6. That's the kind of stuff that bothers me. It's that stuff would be bombs raining down on the Sixers and their fans and their media, but it's a Miami Heat, so it doesn't matter. So that's the kind of stuff that pisses me off. That's why I'm happy to see them lose. And as much as it sucks, the Celtics move on.
Yeah. There's a lot of truth in what you said. There's a lot of double standards across media in general, and with scrutiny for players. It is such a reactionary time. And even back to that Jimmy Butler shot, if he hits that, he's the best player in the universe right now. There's always insane all-time takes about where he should be amongst the all-time greats and all that, versus he misses it and everyone's criticizing if he even should have shot it and all that kind of thing. So it is crazy how much the pendulum swings with all those kind of takes, but it's kind of the nature of the media world we live in, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I saw something earlier that was like, somebody said like, I've always considered Dirk's ring to be the most like the craziest ring or whatever, the most impressive ring. But if Jason Tatum, if the Celtics win and he beats all these players, I'm like, man, like, why are we doing this? Like,
Yeah,
why are we
yeah,
actually doing this? Not the time. Not right now.
yeah.
Anyway, I didn't really expect to go on a little rant here just 5 minutes into this podcast. I got my blood pressure up already, but it is what it is. So we'll move on to talk about the Sixers because obviously the focal point here. So Darvin Ham has been hired by the Lakers. So the Doc Rivers to LA dreams are officially dead. How are
Mhm.
you feeling about this? Because this essentially solidifies Rivers being back as the Sixers head coach next season.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like it was somewhat of a pipe dream that the
Yeah.
Sixers would just be able to get off Doc Rivers for something back. Even would have been insane, and I would have been so impressed with Morey if he pulled it off. I do think there's a little bit of an extent of Morey kind of overplaying his hands in terms of like the repetitive like public message of we want him back as a part of our long-term future, which I get he has to do to some regard. But I think the Lakers like there had to be some sort of genuine interest there, and I really did think there was a strong possibility that's where Doc ended up. So it felt like a perfect match there. Obviously, it didn't work out. Sixers are still with Doc. I think money played a major part in the decision, especially not for him to be fired. And now, granted, like I've been on fairly strongly on record with I think Doc gets more blame than he actually deserves in terms of a lot of the things, but that definitely doesn't mean he's been perfect by any extent. But Doc Rivers still on the books, signed his 4-year, $40 million contract, the third highest paid coach in the NBA, which is disappointing. I I don't really know how I feel about Doc because he's the level of like fine enough where it's okay, but he's certainly not going to win you any games. And I think you're kind of accepting the fact that it's like when you get down to the playoffs, every little like factor matters so much, and to kind of go in with somewhat of a disadvantage when we talk about like you look at the coaches that are still there in the playoffs, it's the elite tier like game decision making, the guys that are on the fly, able to adjust, read the game. And I don't think Doc quite fits that bill. And I don't think he can fully exclude you from winning a championship, but you're not doing yourself any favors. So I wish they had found a way to move on, but it's the reality of what we're in.
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of settled into the idea of Doc being back. We talked about it a lot, especially immediately following the playoffs. I thought he did a good job
Yeah.
in this postseason. I think again, it's really hard for me to really even gauge this postseason. Um, Looking back on it, obviously reactionarily, like right away afterwards, I was pissed. I'm claiming all these things. These people have to go. This has to happen. It's the same thing I did last year. But like looking back now, a couple weeks removed, it feels a little bit like less like we're in dire straits. Like to me, it feels like they're in an okay position. Like it's not as bad as I once realized. Um, Doc is the coach that we have, right? He's kind of the guy that's here. You're probably not looking out to too many guys that would be an upgrade. Just historically what Doc is. I don't think you're looking at that many guys that are in the field right now that you're able to get that would be an upgrade. Um, I think the more frustrating part is looking at the guys that are still around. You look at Monty Williams, you look at Ime Udoka. Like these guys were literally in the locker room like 2 seasons ago. Like if the Sixers had Ime Udoka right now as their head coach, like I think things are looking a lot differently, and I'm personally feeling a lot better. Again, hindsight is 2020. Who knew what Ime Udoka was going to be before all this happened? Who knew? Whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. To me, I just feel like it's not that it doesn't get much better. So it's better to just like if the move is lateral, it's better to keep Doc just for the fact that there's continuity there. So to me, it's okay.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It was not a strong head coaching market this year. That's kind of what I like assumed why the Doc Rivers thing would become more and more legit. Uh, I mean, like you said, I guess if it's a lateral movement, you're better off with Doc. Personally, I just like my issues with Doc go far beyond like the basketball aspect. It's kind
Yeah.
of just the vibe and the personality that he gives off and allows for the rest of the team to follow in terms of like the not accepting responsibility and everything that goes along with like his I know ball answers, and it's frustrating. I mean, my ideal offseason would have been to upgrade Sam Cassell to that
Yeah.
head coaching gig. I do think like a youthful voice in the organization would make a difference, and that's not at all what Doc Rivers is. I mean, he's been around forever. He's actually younger than I thought he was. He's 61 years old. He will be this year. So I did think there were a couple more years on him than that. So I don't know, but it is what it is. Doc Rivers is the coach. I don't expect much to change. And the bottom line is there's bigger issues with this Sixers team and roster than the head coach.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that we're gonna have to get into, and again, like what we've talked about mostly is that Doc wasn't the number one factor in this year's postseason fall. I think that's kind of where the like leniency comes from me, is that like I can look at that series and not say, okay, Doc's the reason that they lost. I actually thought he was kind of the reason that they were in it for a bit. Again, I don't know. Like I think the thing that really frustrates me the most is like just those duds that the Sixers put out, like game 6 and game 7. Like I don't know where that comes from. I don't know like in what world that's okay. I don't know how you fix that. I guess you see it happens to other teams, like the Eastern Conference Finals was just like blowout after blowout, and then there was 2 good games at the end. But like, I don't know. I don't know if that's a Doc thing or if that's a something else thing.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there's going to be kind of like not an overreaction, but I think the Sixers are going to swing a great deal in the not wrong direction. It's probably the right direction, but just opposite of what they've been doing in terms of like the Heat run this year. I think should be a valuable lesson to all the analytical minds, all the basketball, and same with the Celtics to some extent. They're certainly the more talented talented team. They have a ton of players who are just superstars in their role, but it's all about that hunger, that willingness, that everything that goes along with it. And like PJ Tucker is like a prime example. Kyle Lowry, you can call out like the points and stuff, but you see him like the way he just is a pest and is in the mix of everything. Like it does matter to a team. It is the worst. Him and Marcus Smart both just back and forth with all antics yesterday, but you got to love it to some extent. And it does bring a boost for the team. The Sixers miss that kind of guys, and that's what needs to be filled with these role players. That's been the missing piece. Guys like Furkan Korkmaz, Shake Milton, Matisse Thybulle are not the type of role players that like move the meter on winning a game and are able to change the momentum in a way that the team needs. And that's what we're seeing with these teams that are going deep in the postseason for everywhere. I mean, the Warriors and Celtics both have like guys like Robert Williams, Grant Williams, Derek White, all guys that are just like do their job completely right, bring a positive impact. And that's the stuff that is continually missed with this Sixers organization. Like obviously Embiid catches the brunt. Obviously, like there's been the second tier issues and not having a true second guy for him. The Harden issues are still there. The Simmons issues have still been there. The critiques of all these guys, Tobias Harris, the critiques with him as well. But like the bottom line is like the top level talent and complementary pieces have to be so in sync in terms of what they do right, what they do wrong, filling the holes. There's just such little margin for error when you get to like this level of the playoffs, and the Sixers have failed to capitalize on those margins.
Yeah, and I think something else that goes for this, and this is something obviously the Sixers can't help at this point, and almost a flaw like in retrospect to not necessarily the process in general, but like you look at the Celtics, fully homegrown, right? Like not too many guys being brought in or out. And even the guys that are being brought back in are guys that have already played there. Like you look at Horford, you look at Tice, like there's other guys. I'm not even going to talk about Al Horford. We're not worth the time today. But like those guys have been there. And then the other guys, their main stars are guys that, Marcus Smart, Tatum, Brown, all those other Grant Williams, Rob Williams, all those guys, like those are Celtics guys. I think that's a flaw within the Sixers organization that really hinders them from being like practically good. And there's a lot of guys that are in between, in and out. And like, this is something that bothers me. And this is something I kind of like overlooked until Drew Smith like kind of pointed out, and he gets pissed about it all the time, is like the Sixers fans as a whole, like kind of treat these players like puppies, like in a way that's like weird, right? Like it's always like Matisse was like, oh, that's our baby. Like that's Philadelphia's son, like all this stuff. Like I want a dog. I want a guy that goes out there and like wants to fight, like wants to get in a fist fight. And there has to be at least one of those guys, you're pointing out these guys like Furkan too. And like, even to a degree with Tyrese, like Tyrese is a completely different animal because he's so good. But like, even he's like, oh, he's like a cute little boy. It's like, I want him to punch somebody in the face. Like, I remember the whole city like threw a parade when they saw Matisse Thybulle swear. Like, this man is 25 years old, and he finally said like a swear word on camera, and Mike Scott like threw a party. I'm like, I want somebody to. I hate that the Sixers need less of that.
Yeah.
So like, and you're pointing that out. We're agreeing at the same time right now, but
Mhm.
like that's what I need. Like we need somebody like that.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that's like a fan treatment issue or anything. It's like this is not naturally who these guys are. Like
No,
Matisse
right,
Thybulle
right.
is not that guy. Shake Milton is not like a get in your face guy. All these guys, and I think that's way more so like on the player for bringing that. Like Mike Scott was beloved here, and a guy who was
Yeah,
a
true.
very below average basketball player, a guy that like literally just had like the look and toughness of like what Philly wanted, and the fact that there was that version of that is what got like the fan group so excited. So I get what you're saying with that, but it's like I feel like it's a like the player brings that out, not as much as the
Yeah.
fans treating it like that. And I do think that's something that changes. And as far as when you talk about like the homegrown element with the Celtics, do you think it's a developmental issue on the Sixers franchise, or do you think it's like a selection issue?
Both. I mean, it's definitely both.
Yeah.
You think back, and I get frustrated when people point this out all the time. It's like, oh, you could have had Bridges, and you could have had
Yeah,
this
you
guy,
don't.
or you could have had that guy.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, and yes, like yes, the Sixers could be a better team right now if they had drafted better. But like you look back, and all these teams have those missed selections. Like the
Yeah.
Bucks took Jabari Parker right before Joel, like literally right before Joel Embiid. So, and then they got lucky, and Giannis turned out to be like one of the greats. So
Yeah.
like there you go. There you have the missed ones, and then you have the hits. So you have Joel Embiid here, but you have Zaire Smith here, and the Bridges thing hurts obviously, but there's other guys that you think like Landry Shamet. Like Landry Shamet would be great right now.
Mhm.
Traded him away. There's a lot of those guys too that could have been guys that would have helped or turned out to be helpful. But the timeline, I think I keep going back to this a lot. Like the timeline that was shifted with Embiid and Simmons having so much early success
Yeah.
screwed all of that up. And it's like you see the up and downs of this Celtics team. Like you see they had, early on, they had 2 great seasons right away. They're playing in the Eastern Conference Finals against LeBron James. They're playing out of their minds, and this team is young. And then they have this lull, this 2-year lull of like, shit, we can't get over the hump. And the frustrating part, the annoying part is now we're looking at the success of building around them, really figuring out what they're good at and how they fit, rather than moving on because of their early success, like the Sixers ended up having to do. Not on them entirely, right? But
Mhm.
that kind of thing is bothersome, and the Sixers went for it right away, which as a fan, it's like great, we got Jimmy Butler, we got Tobias Harris, we're making this run. And that ended up kind of like boning them in the end because they pushed the timeline. Now they're in win now when they could have been like win over a span of time, which is what the
Yeah.
Celtics did. So I don't know. It's so tough right now.
Yeah, I agree with all that though. I think patience is a major factor in this, and like that the impatience that has been shown like publicly and just within the Sixers organization. I mean, when we
Yeah.
talk about like the process as a whole, and I just got into a whole rabbit hole before this of like shout out Sixers Adam on Rice Ricky Sanchez for the article on the whole burner gate and everything that went like that. But just like the way like the whole process was derailed, and obviously like the NBA did not enjoy it going down, and did everything to stop it. But just the way like the plan was never able to get played out, we didn't get to see this. And I think the development of a lot of these guys was rushed. But then like at the same time, the players that we do hold on to, when we talk about Furkan, we talk about Shake, and like these are guys that like haven't taken that next step either. And it sucks to like look at other organizations and see like how
Yeah.
much their homegrown guys continue to grow. Like Giannis, obviously an extreme example, but it's like the Bucks like lived and died with like his progress. Like Jason Kidd, when he was the coach there, this is when Giannis like was not an effective dribbler or passer. And he said, like, I am not taking the ball out of his hand because that guy is going to continue to grow and he's going to become the best version of himself in order for the team to become the best version of ourselves. And I feel like the Sixers, outside of Embiid, who obviously spent the first 2 years not even on the court, doing everything he needed behind the scenes, which is a major reason why he is the impactful player he is today, because of how he learned so many of the nuances of a game, of his style of play. That was huge for him. But like there isn't that same extent of patience. And I don't know what exactly it is. I think it's more of an organizational issue than anything across the board, but there just is not that like direct line of path for like player selection to development to impact in the way like that we see across other organizations.
Yeah. I mean, even like I hate to use this example, but like with Fultz as well.
Hmm.
Um, and like you see this kind of like thought process and behavior plague the Lakers. Look at the guys
Yeah,
that they've traded away. And I mean, again, they got a championship. So, if the Sixers have gotten a championship over the last 3 years, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation.
for sure.
It's a little bit different though. you bring in LeBron, that's the trade that you make, whatever. Regardless, like those guys, you see them go away and have this progress and become impactful players. I mean, not that you even want Fultz anymore. Like not to bring him into this because he has nothing to do with this really, but he's a guy that has found a way, despite his injuries, to become an impactful player, to become a good solid guard. The expectation was so much more, and the way that it played out, he had to get out of here to find that.
Yeah.
Okay. But like, where was there's no patience. The patience you're talking about does not exist. And Embiid was such a good player right away that it was like, oh, he's going to build on this. And he took a different type of leap than all the other guys that we're talking about. So I don't know. It's so tough. But then you see a guy like Tyrese and you want to credit that to him, right? I think it is more him. And I think it is more Joel Embiid than it was the Sixers. Like, I think there's outliers because outliers exist, not because there's guys that end up doing more work. But like, Matisse has gotten nowhere essentially. Simmons, but I think again that was an outlier in the wrong direction. So it's so hard to get in the mind of these guys and their camp and everything they've done because we don't have that info. It would be nice though, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you do wonder. I at the end of the day, so much of this falls on every individual player. Like, this is your craft to master. This is the aspect of what you want to improve. Maxi's a guy who's like a straight up gym rat, a guy who can't get to stop working, and I love that about him. I think the whole city loves that about him, and that is a major reason for his development. He's a guy that just wants it and proves it. Embiid obviously such a unique case because of like the 2 years injured and getting a chance to do all the behind the scenes work. I really do think that was so valuable for him specifically because of how recently he had picked up basketball and doing all this. Like, that's a path that I will probably never be mirrored again, but I'm very happy he was able to walk down it. And then when we talk about like the moves to like transition into win now mode, like so many of those were just just fumbled too. And when we talk about like the Horford thing, the Celtics, I mean, I'm convinced like Al Horford was a double agent in his time with the Sixers. Like, there's just no way. This is the only stretch of his career that he has not been like a perfect complementary piece and a perfect like great impact beyond the numbers player was in Philadelphia. And sure, some of it's fit. Absolutely. Their usage of him was not good. It just didn't work whatsoever. But it really is frustrating because he is such a great player right now and has been for the bulk of his career. And it just did not work. It just did not work.
I don't even know, man. I don't know if it was Simmons. I don't know if it was Brett. I don't know. Like, again, like I think you look back on those type of things and say, why didn't this work out? And what happened here? And now you have to question the way that you thought about it then, because then it was Horford, and then it was whoever else, and then it was Jimmy, but now you look back and it's probably Ben. So it's hard. Again, it's hard to look back on that because we weren't there, and I think the idea of Jimmy Butler has plagued the Sixers so heavily, especially recently. But like even just especially just since he left. So,
yeah.
But it's a lot of things that go into this, and I think now, with the way that things are, you get to easily overlook it. But the Sixers fans, I feel like, do dwell on these mistakes a lot. And I know there are a lot. And, but there's a lot of hindsight. Like, Markelle Fultz was that pick. He absolutely was.
Yeah.
Go take yourself back to that day.
Washington Markelle.
Yeah. Like Washington Markelle, he was the guy. And at the time, Zaire Smith didn't seem like he might turn out to be that bad. And there was a pick involved and all this stuff. So
I still believe in Zaire Smith. I actually want to put that out there real quick. I still believe in Zaire Smith. He's 22 years old. He's making his NBA comeback right now. Guy who obviously literally almost died from his sesame allergy, lost 50 pounds, was on eating and drinking tube for months after the fact, had a hole in his esophagus, has managed to work himself back into being able to play NBA basketball. Now, granted, he was a guy who pretty much purely relied on his athleticism, strength, and all that stuff. That's a tough way to come back from it, but he's starting his first organized basketball pretty much since the fact. Played a little G League, but that's just about it. But I would love nothing more than a Zaire Smith comeback, and I will be rooting for that guy.
Yeah, man. Good for him. Good for him for getting back. But yeah, I don't know, man. It's I guess that kind of segues us into a conversation topic we wanted to have as well. It's like we're talking about how the developmental staff and all these things, and the internal of the Sixers, how much that actually matters, and kind of going back to Doc now with this team, how much do you think Doc as a coach compared to any other coach actually matters? Because I think this is a question that goes about in the NBA a lot. And I think there's
Yeah.
two really strong sides of the coin.
Yeah, I would say in general, I lean more toward the coaching doesn't matter as much, but at the same time, like every advantage matters. So it's like I don't think Doc is the as bad of a coach that you can't win with him, but I don't think he's a coach that helps you on your way there. And I don't think he's also a perfect match for the Sixers. And I would say as a coach, fit matters like just as much as anything else. And just having like your type of players and guys you match up with. And I don't think that's what the Sixers are. I also hate whenever it's catered to what Doc wants. And that's when we get a DeAndre Jordan. That's why we're probably going to sign like a legitimate backup center again and waste Paul Reed and Charles. Yeah. Yeah. And waste Charles Bassey and Paul Reed again. But I don't know. I guess my official position is like coaching does matter to an extent, but I players win you games, and there's moments where it's just like the roster and all that stuff are bigger factors in my mind.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, I think that is the side of people that I agree with that.
Mhm.
Players play the game, players miss or make shots. That's what it depends on. Fit wise, that matters a lot. The thing I do think though is a coach as a leader matters.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like you see Ime Udoka and what he's done. You see what Eric Spoelstra is like. Him and Jimmy Butler can scream at each other in a huddle, and still turn around and have a really successful second half of the year going into the postseason, because that was right before the playoffs. Like, I think that type of thing matters. You see, I'm sure you've seen, and everyone's seeing the clips of Monty Williams, and the way that he communicates with his team, and portrays himself and carries himself. That I think that kind of stuff matters. Steve Kerr, like I'm talking about all the higher tier, Greg Popovich, like these guys know how to connect with their players, bring the best out of those players. And when the time is there, like when you get the coaching clips, like on ESPN or whatever it is, and they're yelling things, and it's always something stupid. It's always like, we got to get back on defense. It's stuff that like I would be telling like a fifth grade basketball team if I was in the huddle too. Like, it kind of boils down to that at times. It's the preparation and the leadership, I think, is what's more important. And when you talk about Doc Rivers, I think that's where the question marks are, which is what hurts the most.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that either. It also, like, when you're a head coach, there's a great deal of it that you pretty much like have to take more shit than you actually deserve. Like, you have to hand up my bad way more often than just about anyone on the court. And that's something that Doc Rivers does not do well at all. Like, we have, not that he throws guys under the boat, on rare occasions he does, but for the most part, it's just more of like a brush it off. I don't know, all that. I did it this way because I know best, that kind of thing. But like, I do envy when I watch like Monty Williams or Ime Udoka or any of these head coaches like step up and say like I got to be better. Like, this is on me. I need to be smarter with this, make better rotations, make a better read on this. Like, I just love seeing that from a coach. Like, put yourself out there. And I think that would do a ton of wonder for the Sixers organization and every organization. And I mean, it just like that is probably my biggest gripe with Doc, is I think he's just handled his outward appearance with everything so poorly. And I think that like infiltrates some beliefs on the basketball court regarding him. And I get it why it does as well. He's made a lot of like reporters. I always have an issue with the reporter thing, because it's like, dude, you're talking to people who are also paid to watch basketball. Like, this isn't like the general public saying this. Like, you have to have some respect with all this thing. And I do think this clouds like a lot of it, because he has come off like an asshole, like a lot.
Yeah, I think my biggest thing with Doc, and I think the thing that bugs me the most, is the way that he carries himself during games. I've never seen a picture of another coach playing in a playoff series, leaning back in his chair with his hands behind his head. And like, that's a meme. That's a picture of Doc Rivers you see like probably a couple times a week. Like, you see the clip of Jason Kidd during their game, and running up and down the sideline and jumping and yelling and playing like mirror defense with his defense. It's like the most emotion you get from Doc Rivers on a nightly basis is complaining. And that's the kind of shit that bothers me, because that type of energy is like transported through onto the court. And you see the way that, and I know, Harden's going to complain. He does what he does. And, Embiid's going to as well. But like, when you have a coach like Udoka or Kidd or any of these other guys, and they demand more than that, and they themselves are like carrying themselves at a higher level than that, like, that breeds that into even your star players. Like, that's the difference I need to see. And I felt like I saw that from Doc in the postseason. Like that was the only hope I had. Like the way that he adjusted in the Miami series and even beforehand in the Toronto series, and the way that he coached the way he looked on the sideline while he was coaching was way better than what we've seen before. And that just needs to be better. And I do think if that's better, the team will play better as well. But that is the problem with Doc. You never know.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think to move on to a little more roster construction stuff, kind of what we talked about here. So when we put out, I had an Instagram post the other day with kind of a who
Yeah.
must stay, who must go, and on the must goes, Tobias Harris is pretty firmly on my list. There was some negative feedback with guys disagreeing with that, and so I'm kind of curious. We've been through the ringer on the public opinion on Tobias Harris, but James, could you be talked into Tobias Harris coming back next year?
Yeah, and when we did the last pod, when you asked, I said explore the options. You said must go, so you
Yeah.
were definitely more in the. And again, I'm not against moving Tobias at all. I think it's based on package, based on what you're getting back, based on any sort of cap relief, what have you. But I really liked what I saw from Tobias at the latter end of this season, what he was able to do on both ends of the basketball, and I think like again, I hope this is the mindset that the Sixers are in, is that you have a baseline here. It's similar to Doc. If the move is lateral, it's better to have continuity. It's better to have Tobias. It's better to have what he is as a leader and a player, a locker room guy, than it is to have like another guy that's similar in production but isn't Tobias. So I'd like to see him grow along Harden and Embiid and Maxey for that matter. Um, I think his role is interesting going into next year if he's still here. But again, I think if the option's there to improve at that position or improve depth wise, you do that.
Yeah. So I'll start off like I love Tobias as a human being, one of the just most well spoken, just stand up great guy for the community, for the team, for everything. A guy that's been asked to do a ton of different things during his time here. His role has changed drastically. He has done his best to adapt his game, fit what the team needs. I'm super impressed with what he did defensively this postseason, and I do think this playoffs is probably his most like effective stretch of basketball that he's played throughout his entire career. But with all that like said, the Sixers cannot play another game with Tobias Harris on roster. And like I get what he does great. I also would challenge you to find like another guy with similar stat lines who is less impactful in the game as Tobias Harris. And again, no disrespect to him, but like there's not a lot of 20-point per game scorers that just go under the radar in the way that he does. And when we talk about like the logistics of building a roster for this team, I mean, Tobias Harris is the largest cap hit on the team heading in next year. Obviously, James Harden could change that, but 37.6 mil is even more than Joel Embiid at 33.6 mil. And to be paying that guy that much money to soak up that much of your cap space, it just like I don't see the flexibility that you can pull off without trading him. And I even think like trading Tobias for two role players and that kind of a move like that is a more effective long-term vision than like keep riding with all that money tied up in this one guy who he's not bad. He's not going to kill you. He'll do his thing once in a while, but it's like Tobias Harris is not the difference between winning a championship and not on any roster across the NBA. So I think the Sixers have to find a way to get rid of that, to open up different options and just to find flexibility to truly build up this roster.
Yeah, I mean, where do you this is something we're going to talk about for the remainder of the offseason until, probably through next year, to be honest, like through February of next year. But unless something happens, but I think that there's options out there. And again, I said this at the front of the pod because I was just looking through things today and I'm just thinking that there's ways to maneuver this. Tobias being one of them. If you are able to, offload him for something, two players, like I think I said last podcast that I would prefer that. I don't think you need that massive player. I think you need two guys that fit, this team, this roster better, instead of trying to make a big splash again. So because again, we talked about the depth, we talked about everything else, energy, athleticism, 3-point shooting, those type of players, guys that are going to get in a fight, something, some sort of attribute. I think if they complement the team and it's, I think it's almost better if it's two guys. But again, Tobias is still a very good player and he proved to be a good player, late in the playoffs. So I don't know, man, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, on Philly Sports Network, you can check out my full article. But one of my we laid out our ideal Sixers off seasons, and my trade for Tobias, I want to run by you. So trading from the Mavericks, which first off, I think Tobias is a pretty Dallas Mavericks player. I could see him fitting there, like seriously. So I think this isn't that far out of the ballpark. But Sixers trade away Tobias Harris, Isaiah Joe, Shake Milton, and 2 second-round picks for Reggie Bullock, Davis Bertans, and Tim Hardaway Jr.
I mean, again, I love that. I don't know if
Yeah,
Dallas does that. I don't know if Dallas does that.
yeah,
But I do like it. I mean, Bullock fits the bill.
yeah.
Hardaway Jr. fits the bill. I have a guy off the bench, and Bertan fit the bill off the
Mhm.
bench. Like floor spacers, defenders. I mean, Bertans isn't a good defender, but he does something. There again, though. I mean, is he starting?
No.
Who's in place for him? Like Niang plays that same role. But again, I don't know. I like that deal though. Bullock and Hardaway Jr. are really good players.
Yeah, Bullock's the ideal guy in that trade for me. I love Reggie Bullock, and that's exactly what the Sixers need. Just a 3-and-D athletic wing, a guy that can guard, can play both sides, hard-nosed player. That's what Reggie Bullock is. So that's kind of the vicinity of like targets of what I kind of see for a Tobias Harris flip. Something in just that get 2 athletic wings for Tobias, and the Sixers are in a better spot as a franchise. So that's my mindset on it. I I guess I won't be the worst thing in the world if Toby is back, but I just really don't see when I look at the ways this team can continue to step forward, pretty much the common denominator in my mind is like you have to get off that contract. You have to open up like opportunities for you to find players that improve the team.
Yeah, and again, I agree. Like I'm not going to be devastated if the Sixers enter next season with Tobias on the roster. I'll say
Hmm.
that. But I think there's options out there, and we can go into that maybe next week. We can
Hmm.
talk about what specifically would be the best option. But again, I think that there's a lot of different ways to maneuver that. I think adding Matisse to a deal like that makes it pretty, um, you know, but that's a lot of money to take on. So these other teams are going to have to be willing to do that as well. And it's going to have to be one high level player that makes a lot of money or a few lower tier players that make, spread that money out. So I don't know, man. It'll be interesting. There's a lot to think about right now because there's a lot of different ways I feel like this could play out.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess the last thing that we really want to talk about here is Joel Embiid back at it with the Twitter fingers through the Miami Heat series and stirring the whole pot. So, uh, I mean, do you have any issue with him tweeting online? First off.
No.
No, no,
No,
I honestly
absolutely
love
not.
it. I also think it's very funny because I think he knows exactly what he's doing. I think he's
Yes,
smart
he
enough that
does.
he knows he's stirring the pot. Yeah. So it started back in Game 7 with just a simple tweet: "Is this series over or Heat still got a chance?" And then a couple minutes later, Miami needs another star, and then one more. Boston just has too many weapons. The Miami needs another star had 20,000 retweets with a ton of blowing up, and then he followed up with a "Okay, y'all are stupid, LMAO," which I love. The photoshops of Embiid in Miami came out very quickly. Did not take long for anybody to jump over that, and then he finally capped it off after during Game 7 as Jimmy Butler started his 35-point performance with just a quote, "Mama, there goes that man." So what is your thoughts of just Embiid's continued friendship, fascination with Jimmy Butler, however you want to put it?
I don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. Embiid's a Sixer, man. He's only said it a million
Yeah.
times. And the Sixers are not going to trade him to the Miami Heat. Like, are we like, is people actually like Howard Eskin like had a meltdown over it?
Yeah, he did.
And he's like,
Yeah, he
could you
did.
please be a professional? It's like, dude, this is Twitter. Like, this is twitter.com. We all have to take a step back and realize how stupid you sound right now. You're like having a fit over this. I mean, would I prefer if he would not like give anyone the idea that he'd ever play outside of the Sixers, like outside of Philadelphia? Yeah, I'd probably prefer that. But he's a grown man with a Twitter account that loves to joke with people. Like that is his like number one thing. And he's talked about it on the JJ Redick podcast. He's like, I'm not dumb. Like I
Yeah.
know that people are gonna react. He's like, that's the only reason I do it. He's like, I literally will tweet and then put my phone down for 3 hours and not look because I know people are losing their minds. It's like,
Yeah.
stop taking it seriously. It's a big joke. And if you're actually getting mad about what Joel Embiid is tweeting, I urge you to reevaluate what you're doing.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah. I mean, would I prefer that he did not do it? For sure. But like I
Yeah.
do think it's funny that he does. I think it's like he's definitely calmed himself from when he first came to the NBA. Like throwback to when he's tweeting at Rihanna about going on dates when he's
Yeah.
recruiting LeBron James and all this. Like he used to be way more I don't even know, reckless with it, if that's the phrase, but I like that he's got a start. I like that he has a human side. And when I had a chance to like do the press conferences with him last year and interact with him, like it was through Zoom, but on somewhat of like a personal level, I was blown away with just kind of the intelligence across the board of Joel Embiid. And I think that's something that goes underrated for it. So he's a smart guy. He understands what he's doing. He's there to cause a reaction, and everybody should chill out about it.
Yeah, I'm not gonna have any sort of. I didn't even think about it today. Like it's one of those things you got to just move on. It's a tweet, so I'm not worried.
I do think he genuinely does miss Jimmy Butler though, and that
Yeah,
is something that like does suck. Like looking at it, especially like as much as like we gas up Embiid and I love everything about him, he's not like the easiest guy in the world to play with, and from a on court perspective, in terms of like he's very ball dominant. He likes to do his thing on the perimeter. He posts up, does a lot on the perimeter. Just very needs the ball a lot. His impact is with the ball in his hands for the most part. Jimmy Butler just does seem like a perfect guy to compliment, and it's like so sad for him to have came and went.
yeah. I saw somebody tweet earlier that Embiid and Butler are holding each other back from winning a championship by not being on the same team. Like they're the missing piece for each other. And I was like, all right, enough. I've had enough.
Yeah.
And it would be one thing if he didn't play here at one point.
Yeah.
It'd be one thing if he wasn't ever here. He'd be like, oh, that would be cool. That'd be fun. And the fact that they got along and that they still get along. I don't know. I don't want to think about it. It's over. You know, we're thinking about our ex again, but
Yeah.
it's tough. I mean, of course it's tough. He's like, it's the type of player that he is. He is who
Right.
he is. And that with Joel Embiid makes life really difficult for anyone playing them. But they don't play on the same team anymore. So
Yeah, definitely sucks, but it is what it is. Moving on. Sixers and Heat are both now home packing. So
yeah.
on to Celtics and Warriors final, and the rest of us will enjoy the offseason.
Yeah, disgusting. I hate it. I don't like this finals. I don't at all. I don't even. I mean, of course, I'm rooting for the Warriors. Of course, I am. But I don't want to see them win again. I've already seen them win a bunch of times. So, whatever. Anyway, I do think it's funny that like Kyrie left Boston, and like KD left Golden State because they both like wanted to be like the win a ring on their own. And then like now the teams that they left are both playing for a title. But regardless, we can move on here because, you know, we've gone for about 40, almost 42 minutes. And we can wrap up unless you have anything else.
No, I'm all good.
All right. So check out, again, the 215 Scoop. They debuted last week. We have the Double Switch podcast coming to Pick Swap Media this week, right?
Yeah.
So keep an eye out for that. That'll be a lot of fun too. You know, the Phillies are miserable right now, but, you know, join the party. We all are. So, you know, get in on the action. We didn't even say anything about BetUS today. Kind of completely forgot. But we like to thank our sponsor, BetUS. They're one of the leading sportsbooking casinos in the market. You can use our code PICKSWAP at login to get your first bet risk-free up to $500. That's PICKSWAP at login. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can get Sean at Sean_Bernard1. Follow me at JaceBrandon17. Follow the pod at PickSwapPod. Check out the YouTube. Get us anywhere you get your podcast. Check the link in the bio for the BetUS link. And, you know, hopefully nothing crazy happens until next week. We'll talk to you guys next Monday.